In horror movies, people get dead. Slashed, skewered, splattered, you name it. Nothing's off limits in a scary movie. But not all of these fright film fatalities are created equal. Some kills have us screaming for more. Others leave us dying from boredom. And I will be the judge and jury of these executioners. Welcome to Killer Report Card, this new thing I'm doing where I pick a horror movie and grade every kill in that movie. I'm starting off with the original Friday the 13th because, of course I am. For each of these kills, I'm grading the entire sequence leading up to the kill, which basically means I'm factoring in the setup of each kill scene, as well as the kill itself. Higher marks go to kills that are suspenseful, scary, innovative, over the top, or just plain fun. The assignments are in. Let the grading begin.
It's 1958 at Camp Crystal Lake. Two camp counselors, Barry and Claudette, sneak off to the supply shed attic to fool around. But they are rudely interrupted by our killer, who stabs Barry right in the guts.
The kill itself, pretty bad. It's a simple stabbing and the actual impact happens off screen. The aftermath is just Barry holding his stomach. For all we know, the killer slathered him in ketchup. It's nothing to write home about, but it's not really supposed to be. The first-person POV and the continuous flow of this scene are designed to make this feel more gritty and real. The killer, Mrs. Voorhees, is less experienced at killing in this flashback. She's less confident. So these early kills have a bit more urgency than the ones later in the film, where Mrs. Voorhees' kills feel more calculated. Taking that all into consideration, this scene works well, even though the kills aren't very flashy. C.
Claudette watches her boyfriend fall to the floor. She's cornered, terrified. She attempts to flee the attic, but the killer has blocked her escape route. In desperation, Claudette throws cardboard boxes at the killer, but it does no good. The killer strikes in a freeze frame before we fade to white.
So, according to sources, Claudette is stabbed in the neck. We don't actually get to see this, or even see the body later in the film. This one happens immediately after Barry's kill, so most of what I said about the setup to that one applies here. I think they did a good job of conveying Claudette's terror and hopelessness, but I'm torn on the freeze frame and how to grade it. On one hand, I think it's an iconic shot that works perfectly as a teaser for what's about to follow. That fade to white into the title card, it's perfection. On the other hand, I'm here to grade the kills, and we never see the kill, or even the aftermath. Nonetheless, you feel like you saw her demise even though it cuts away, and it's memorable. So I'm going to be generous and say C+.
In the present day of 1979, future camp cook Annie is on her way to Camp Crystal Lake. She hitches a ride with an unseen driver who gives her the silent treatment. When the Jeep speeds past Annie's stop, Annie's like, "Hey, what gives?" She realizes something seriously wrong with this driver. She pieces out, but the driver stops and chases Annie through the woods. Annie stumbles and the killer catches up. Annie begs for mercy. The killer has none of it and slashes Annie's throat.
All in all, a pretty suspenseful sequence. The car ride is tense, where Annie slowly realizes that her situation is fucked. I like Annie jumping out of the moving vehicle to escape, displaying reasonable survival instincts. I like that Annie is forced to hobble through the woods because she jumped out of the car. The actual kill itself is simple but brutal. The one thing I don't like is how Annie just stands there and does nothing as Mrs. V slowly pulls out this knife and kills her. This girl just jumped out of a moving vehicle, but now she's incapable of fighting back in any way? Try to grab the knife! Block the attack with your arms! Something! Still, great scene. B.
Counselor Ned wanders by the lake until he briefly spots someone entering one of the cabins. He enters the cabin to investigate and is never heard from again. Later in the film, as fellow counselors Jack and Marcy make love in a bunk bed, the camera pans upward to reveal Ned's corpse in the top bunk, his throat slashed.
The reveal that Ned's corpse has been lying over Jack and Marcy the entire time they were doing it is rather unsettling, but that really helps my next rating more than this one. The part leading up to his death is fine. On replay, it is creepy that you can actually see Mrs. Voorhees lurking about the camp in the daytime, but personal bias, I'm just not a fan of these types of scenes where we as the audience have no clue someone gets dead until they show us the body later in the film as a cheap shock tactic. It always feels like a cop-out, particularly in slasher movies where the entire point is to show the kills. D+.
Counselors Jack and Marcy sneak off to a cabin to make love, unaware that Ned's corpse is above them the entire time. Afterward, Marcy leaves to go to the bathroom. As Jack lies in bed, Ned's blood drips onto Jack's face from the bunk above. From below, the killer grabs Jack's face and jams an arrow through the mattress, impaling Jack's throat.
I talked in another video about how this kill doesn't seem plausible, and I stand by those comments. But despite that, I enjoy this one. The idea of someone waiting under your bed to get you is creepy, even if the physics are impossible. Seriously, go watch that video if you don't believe me. Of all the kills in this movie, I think this one is the kill that established the template for Friday the 13th kills going forward. It's innovative, it's gory, and easily the most memorable kill in the movie. A-.
While Jack is getting arrowed, Marcy is in the bathroom facility. As she pees, the killer enters the building. Washing her hands, Marcy hears something that sounds like a child singing. Marcy goes to investigate but finds nothing. She turns around to see the killer holding an axe over her head. The axe swings down and strikes Marcy in the face.
There's a lot I love about this scene. The setup is perfect. The toilets are in this separate building, isolated from the rest of the cabins. Marcy is alone and vulnerable as the killer enters the building. The singing in the child's voice adds a creepy touch. I love the shadow of the axe. I love the axe nailing the light fixture. Marcy slumping out of frame with the axe in her face is gruesome and perfect. And ending it all with this shot of the light fixture still rocking from the impact. Honestly, one of my favorite things in this entire movie. My one complaint about this scene, think of this whole scene from Marcy's POV. You're in the bathroom and you turn around and there's this strange old lady holding an axe over her head. Is this your reaction? I mean, I could understand bewildered or shocked, but closing your eyes and screaming? It's as if she had already assessed the situation and accepted her fate. I don't buy it, but everything else is amazing, so B.
Steve returns to the camp. "Hey, I know you," turns into "Wait, what?" as Steve is stabbed in the chest with a hunting knife.
Love the blinding flashlight beam, love the Camp Crystal Lake sign. I like how Steve recognizes the killer, but this is just Barry's kill scene again. Steve Christy is the guy who is responsible for reopening the camp. The reopening of the camp is the entire reason Mrs. Voorhees is having this psychotic bender. She plots out all these elaborate deaths for these random counselors, but the chief person responsible for opening the camp is given a quick wham bam thank you ma'am? Come on. D-.
The last time we see Bill alive, he's in a shed trying to get the camp's generator running. The next time we see him, he's a corpse pinned to the shed door with arrows. Also, his throat was slashed at some point off screen.
While the visual of Bill stuck to the door is perfectly gruesome, poor Bill doesn't even get an effective suspense scene before he bites it. One moment he's fine and he seems to be in no danger. The next moment he's a human pincushion. Don't even get me started on the logistics of how Mrs. Voorhees managed to get Bill in this position after de-throating him. She would somehow need to stand his dead-weight body up against the door, a few inches off the ground so the door can still freely open. I mean, this is an older woman, mind you. Then she would need to go back and fire arrows into Bill's body with enough force that they would pierce Bill's body and the door to hold him in place. Despite my complaints, it is a memorable corpse find, and I do think it's hilarious that Mrs. V shot one of her arrows into Bill's crotch. If they had showed us how this ridiculousness all happened, I'd probably give this an A+. But because this all happened off screen with no buildup, the best I can do is D+.
Brenda is alone in her cabin reading when she thinks she hears a kid calling for help outside. She grabs a flashlight and wanders out into the heavy rain to investigate, wearing only her grandmother's nightgown, apparently forgetting she hung her raincoat right by the cabin door. The voice leads her to the archery range. The killer flips on the floodlights. Brenda thinks it's a prank, and then, who the hell knows? The next time we see Brenda, her dead body is flying through a cabin window.
On the plus side, I really like the build up to this. Hearing a kid's voice outside at night in the middle of nowhere, kinda creepy. Knowing that it's actually Pamela Voorhees speaking in the voice of her dead son, even creepier. The rain, the floodlights, it all works. But then, like Ned and Bill, they just leave us hanging with another off-screen kill. The worst part, I can't even tell what killed Brenda. Her body is just wrapped in ropes. I mean, what's that all about? You would think, since she was presumably killed on the archery range, that Brenda's body would be filled with arrows, but no, they gave Bill that demise for some reason. It's a pretty lame way to go, but because I like the buildup, I'm going to give this a very generous C-.
After Mrs. Voorhees reveals herself to be the killer, she tries to finish off Alice, the sole survivor of the night's festivities. But Alice fights back. Mrs. Voorhees slaps the piss out of Alice. "Keep my son's name out of your fucking mouth." They wrestle by the beach until Alice breaks free, grabs a machete, and decapitates Mrs. V with one swing.
This scene is brutal and about as final as you can get. The slow-motion hands reflexively gripping the air after she dies is a nice touch, even if they clearly belong to some dude. The effects here aren't perfect, but they work. And Betsy Palmer's oh shit face really sells it all. I would have liked to see a shot of Mrs. V's body slumping to the ground, or her severed head splashing into the water like a beach ball, but it's still pretty damn effective for the era, and in my opinion, one of the most iconic final girl kills the killer scenes in horror history. For that, I'll give it A-. Here at the Robo Danger Academy, we celebrate exceptional film fatalities by putting them on the Goner roll. For the class of Friday the 13th, congrats to Jack and Mrs. Voorhees for making the Goner roll. It shouldn't be a surprise to anyone to see Mrs. Voorhees at the head of the class. Thanks for watching. How would you grade these kills? Let me know down in the comments. Is there a movie you'd like to see in a future Killer Report Card video? Tell me about it. Subscribe for perfect attendance. Watch these for extra credit. And until next time, later, Danger Seekers.